Valentine's Day. A day for love. A day for romance. A day for second chances, or at least, that's what she thought. She never imagined that the man who once promised her forever would be the one to end her life. She never imagined that behind his smile, behind his charming invitation, was something far more sinister. But that's the thing about true monsters. They don't always look like monsters. Sometimes, they look like a man who claims he's changed. A man who says he just wants to talk. A man who waited, plotted, and hunted, until the moment was just right. And on this particular Valentine's night, under the glow of flickering candlelight, as soft music played in the background, he made sure it would be her last. She thought she was walking into a reunion. She was actually walking into a trap. He had been planning this for weeks. Maybe months. Every move was calculated. Every word, rehearsed. And the worst part? She never saw it coming. She didn't see the jealousy boiling beneath the surface. She didn't see the quiet rage in his eyes. She didn't see the way his new girlfriend, his latest obsession, stood nearby, silent, watching. Because this wasn't just any murder. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a cold, premeditated act of power, control, and revenge. And by the time she realized the truth, it was already too late. Tonight, we're diving into a case so chilling, so calculated, it will make you rethink who you trust. A man fresh out of jail. A woman finally free from his grasp. And a deadly Valentine's meeting, that ended in cold blood. What drove him to kill? Was his new girlfriend an accomplice, or a prisoner of his manipulation? And most importantly, could this tragedy have been prevented? Tonight, we expose the darkest side of love, where obsession turns deadly and second chances don't always mean redemption. Welcome to Shocking True Crime Exposed, where we uncover the truth behind the headlines. If you love true crime that doesn't just tell a story, but makes you feel it, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stick with us. Because what you're about to hear is something you'll never forget. Her name was Lisa Monroe. She was 34 years old. A mother. A sister. A friend. And for the last few years of her life, she had been doing everything in her power to build a future for herself and her young son. Lisa had a heart bigger than the pain she had endured. She had spent years trapped in a toxic marriage, one built on promises that turned into threats, fear, and bruises she learned to hide. But she wasn't just another statistic. Lisa was a fighter. After years of abuse, she found the strength to leave. She filed for divorce. She took her son and started over, a fresh start in a new apartment, a steady job, a support system that reminded her she was more than what she had survived. She shared her journey online, posting pictures of quiet Sunday mornings with coffee in hand, her son's smiling face at the park, quotes about healing and self-love. It was her way of reminding herself, and others, that no matter how dark things got, there was always a way forward. But she also had a fear. A shadow that never fully disappeared. Because he was still out there. And deep down, Lisa knew, some men don't let go so easily. Darren Cole is one of those men. 38 years old. A man with a past as dark as his intentions. He wasn't just a jealous ex-husband. He was a convicted felon. A man whose love was never love, only possession, control, and rage waiting to explode. Lisa had tried to leave him before. Many times. But every time she did, he would find a way to pull her back. Apologies. Gifts. Grand gestures. Promises to change. Until the cycle repeated itself, the anger, the accusations, the nights where she would lay awake, terrified of what would happen if she took too long to text him back. Then, one night, he crossed the line. A violent outburst that left Lisa with a fractured wrist and a police report that she could no longer ignore. That was the night she left for good. The night Darren was arrested, convicted, and sentenced. For 3 years, Lisa breathed again. Darren was behind bars. She was free. Or at least, she thought she was. Because prison doesn't always change a man like Darren. Sometimes, it just gives him time to plan. And when he was released, he wanted one thing and one thing only, Lisa. But not to rekindle. Not to apologize. To punish. Then, there was Amber Lynn. 25 years old. Small-town girl. A past that wasn't perfect, but a future she thought she was building. Until she met Darren. To Amber, he wasn't a monster. Not at first. He was charming, intense, protective, everything she thought love should be. He told her about his past, but in a way that made him seem like the victim. My ex ruined my life. She lied about me. She wanted to see me suffer. Amber believed him. And when he told her about wanting to see Lisa again, she didn't question it. She didn't know that this wasn't a reconciliation. It was a setup. This didn't happen in a big city where people barely know their neighbors. This happened in a quiet town, where people remember faces, where everyone knew that Lisa and Darren's marriage had been troubled. Some had seen the bruises. Some had heard the fights. Some had whispered about Lisa's strength when she finally got out. And when Darren was released from prison, it wasn't a secret. People noticed when he showed up around town again. They noticed when he started talking about Lisa. And some of them had a bad feeling. But no one expected Valentine's Day to end in blood. This was supposed to be a fresh start. For Lisa. For Amber. Even, in a way, for Darren. But some people don't believe in letting go. Some people see love as ownership. And on February 14, Darren Cole decided that if he couldn't have Lisa Monroe, then no one could. After 3 years behind bars, Darren Cole walked out of prison on a cold January morning, breathing in fresh air like a man reborn. At least, that's what he wanted everyone to believe. To the world, he painted a picture of redemption. He told friends, family, anyone who would listen, that he wasn't the same man anymore. Prison changed me. I've done my time, and all I want is to fix my life. I just want to be a good father to my son. It sounded convincing. Maybe even genuine. But behind closed doors, Darren wasn't moving on. He was fixating. On Lisa. On the life she was rebuilding without him. On the fact that she had slipped through his fingers once, and he wasn't about to let it happen again. In the weeks after his release, Darren kept a low profile, at least publicly. But in private, he was watching, waiting, planning. He knew exactly where Lisa lived. He knew where she worked. And worst of all, he knew how to get inside her head. Because Lisa had been strong enough to leave, but that didn't mean she wasn't still vulnerable. Darren had years of practice in manipulation. And he was about to use every single trick he had left. The message came out of nowhere. A text. Short. Simple. Just enough to plant the seed. Lisa, can we talk? Lisa hesitated. For 3 years, she had managed to keep Darren out of her life. She had moved on, at least, as much as any survivor of abuse could. But there was one thing that made her pause. Their son. Darren knew that if anything could break Lisa's walls down, it was him bringing up their child. And so, he played his trump card. I just want to be a better father. I just want to see my son. It was Valentine's Day, a day about love, family, and forgiveness. Maybe, just maybe, he had changed. Maybe he was finally the man she had once wished he could be. Maybe, for the sake of their child, she owed him one conversation. When Lisa told her friends about Darren's message, they were instantly uneasy. Lisa, are you serious? You know how he is. What if this is a trap? Please, don't go. Even her gut told her it was a bad idea. But Darren's words played in her head. I just want to talk. For our son. Please. And maybe, deep down, there was a part of her that wanted closure. A part of her that thought, if I face him one last time, maybe I can finally move on. So, despite every red flag, despite every instinct screaming at her to run, Lisa agreed to meet him. But what Lisa didn't know, what none of her friends knew, was that Darren wasn't meeting her alone. Somewhere in the background, Amber Lynn was watching. Silent. Waiting. Did she know what was about to happen? Did she suspect that the man she loved was about to commit a brutal, cold-blooded murder? Or was she just another pawn in his twisted game? What we do know, is that Lisa walked into that meeting with hope. And Darren? He walked in with a plan. A plan that would end in blood. While Lisa weighed her decision, wondering if she was making a mistake, Darren was already certain of what was about to happen. Because to Darren, this wasn't just a conversation. It wasn't about closure. It wasn't about co-parenting. It was about control. Lisa had moved on, but Darren couldn't accept that. In his mind, she was still his. And if he couldn't have her, then no one could. And so, in the days leading up to Valentine's Day, Darren started to test the waters, planting small hints of his twisted intentions to the people closest to him. There were messages, phone calls, late-night conversations where Darren's real thoughts slipped through the cracks. One friend later recalled a chilling moment. He said he couldn't stand seeing Lisa live her life like he never existed. Another heard him joking, half smiling, half serious, about how Lisa needed to be taught a lesson. And then there was Amber. The new girlfriend. The woman who was always by his side, yet never fully understood the storm she had stepped into. At first, Darren's rage toward Lisa seemed like just words. But then, his tone changed. The anger grew. The obsession took hold. One night, as they lay in bed, Darren muttered something that made Amber's stomach drop. If she won't come back to me, she won't be here at all. Amber laughed nervously, hoping it was just a bitter ex venting his frustrations. But deep down, she knew, there was something in his voice that night that terrified her. As Valentine's Day approached, Darren's behavior shifted. He was calm. Too calm. That's the thing about men like Darren, they don't snap in a moment of passion. They plan. And the night before, Darren was preparing. He laid out his clothes, neatly folded, as if dressing for a special occasion. He cleaned his truck, making sure there was nothing inside that could leave a trace. And then, he made a final purchase. A knife. A weapon that would ensure Lisa wouldn't walk away from him a second time. And Amber? She saw everything. She watched him leave that night, pacing the room, knowing something was very, very wrong. But she said nothing. Was it fear? Was it denial? Or was she simply too deep in Darren's world to pull herself out? Maybe she believed that if she didn't ask questions, she wouldn't have to know the answers. Either way, she let him walk out that door. And by the time the sun rose on February 14th, the plan was already in motion. That morning, Lisa woke up uneasy. She had agreed to meet Darren, but something didn't feel right. Something in her gut was telling her this was a mistake. And for the first time, she put that fear into words. She texted a friend, a simple, haunting message, "If anything happens to me, you know who did it." It was a message sent out of instinct, out of self-preservation. But what Lisa didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that this wasn't just paranoia. This wasn't just fear playing tricks on her mind. She was right. Darren wasn't coming to talk. Darren was coming to kill. And within hours, Lisa Monroe would become another name on a tragic list, a woman who left, who fought for her freedom, only to be hunted down by the man who swore he loved her. It was February 14th, a day filled with love and promises for so many. But for Lisa Monroe, it was about one thing, facing her past. She arrived right on time, her heart pounding in her chest. Darren had chosen the location carefully, not too public, not too private. Just the right amount of isolation to control the situation. A small, dimly lit restaurant on the outskirts of town. Somewhere familiar. Somewhere that wouldn't immediately raise red flags. Lisa walked in, scanning the room until she saw him. Darren was already there, sitting at a booth near the back. His posture was too casual, his expression unreadable. And next to him, Amber Lynn. Lisa wasn't expecting that. Why was Darren's new girlfriend here? Lisa hesitated, but Darren smiled, gesturing for her to sit down. Come on, sit. Let's talk. It felt wrong. All of it felt wrong. But she sat. Because deep down, Lisa still believed there was a chance that maybe, just maybe, this was genuine. At first, everything seemed civil. Darren asked about their son, pretending to care, pretending he wanted to be better. Amber sat quietly, barely speaking, her hands folded in her lap. Lisa tried to steer the conversation toward co-parenting, keeping it calm, controlled, professional. But then, Darren started talking about the past. And the shift was immediate. His smile faded. His voice grew colder. I don't understand how you could just leave me like that. Lisa stiffened, suddenly aware of the danger in his tone. Darren, we're not here to talk about that. But Darren wasn't letting it go. You just moved on, like I never meant anything to you. Lisa glanced at Amber, expecting her to intervene, to de-escalate. But Amber just sat there. Watching. Expressionless. Like she knew what was coming. Then Darren leaned forward, his eyes dark, locked onto Lisa like a predator sizing up its prey. And that's when he said it, tell me the truth. Are you seeing someone? Lisa hesitated. Because she was. And somehow, Darren already knew. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Darren's entire body tensed, his fists clenching against the table. Then, in one swift movement, he stood up so violently that the table shook, knocking over a glass of water. The restaurant went silent. A few heads turned. But in a small town, people were used to domestic disputes, and they had seen Lisa and Darren argue before. They didn't know that this time was different. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. She knew this look. The look he got right before he lost control. Darren, sit down. Her voice was calm, steady, but inside. She was terrified. And Darren? Darren had already decided how this night was going to end. The next few seconds happened fast. Lisa stood up to leave, reaching for her purse, her mind screaming at her to run. But Darren was faster. Before she could take a single step, he grabbed her by the wrist, yanking her back so hard that she stumbled. And then, a flash of silver. The knife. The one Darren had brought with him. And before Lisa could scream, before she could fight, the first stab landed. A gasp, sharp, short, escaped her lips as pain exploded through her side. Her hands flew to the wound, warm blood soaking through her dress. She stared at Darren, her eyes wide with shock. And in that moment, she wasn't just feeling pain. She was feeling betrayal. He had planned this. All of it. And the worst part? Amber still wasn't moving. She just sat there. Watching. Lisa staggered back, gripping the edge of the table, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The restaurant erupted in chaos. People screamed. Someone yelled, "Call 911." But Darren wasn't done. Not yet. He grabbed Lisa again, forcing her to the ground, stabbing her again, and again, and again, until her body stopped moving. Until the only sound left was the panicked breathing of witnesses, the distant wail of approaching sirens. Until Lisa Monroe was gone. And Amber? She never screamed. She never begged him to stop. She just sat there. Some say she was frozen in fear. Others believe she knew this was going to happen. Because later, police would uncover something chilling. Amber had known Darren was bringing a knife that night. She had watched him prepare. And yet, she had said nothing. By the time officers stormed the scene, Darren was already gone, fled into the night, leaving behind only a trail of blood and broken glass. Lisa's body lay crumpled on the floor, her once vibrant eyes lifeless, her hands still clenched in a final, desperate attempt to fight back. Amber was taken into custody immediately, but her story? It didn't make sense. She claimed she was just a bystander, that she hadn't known Darren was going to kill Lisa. But her silence that night said otherwise. And Darren? The moment Lisa's body hit the floor, he didn't hesitate. He didn't stay to watch her die. He didn't wait for the screams to stop echoing. He didn't look back at the life he had just stolen. He just ran. Grabbing his coat, blood still wet on his hands, Darren bolted out of the restaurant, shoving past horrified diners, pushing through the doors into the night. It was chaos inside, but out here. It was silent. No sirens yet. No police. Just the sound of his own ragged breath, the slap of his boots against the pavement. His truck was parked around the corner, waiting like an accomplice. He yanked the door open, threw himself inside, and peeled off into the darkness, his tires screeching against the pavement, a monster slipping back into the shadows. Darren Cole was now a fugitive. A wanted man. A murderer on the loose. Inside the restaurant, Amber Lynn still hadn't moved. She was still sitting in the booth, her face pale, her hands trembling in her lap. People around her were shouting, crying, calling 911, but she just stared at the body on the floor. At Lisa. At the blood. At the terrible, irreversible reality of what had just happened. Someone grabbed her by the arm, a server, frantic, shaking her. What just happened? Who was that? Was that your boyfriend? Amber opened her mouth, but no words came out. Because in this moment, she wasn't sure what she was. A bystander? A victim? Or an accomplice? She had known. She had seen it coming. And yet, she had done nothing. Now, she was stuck in the aftermath of Darren's rage. And there was no escaping it. The first 911 call came from a woman in the restaurant, her voice shaking so badly she could barely get the words out. Oh my God, somebody's been stabbed. He just ran. Please hurry. The dispatcher tried to keep her calm. Ma'am, take a deep breath. Tell me where you are. It's a restaurant on Oak Street. A woman, she's not moving. Oh God, I think she's dead. More calls flooded in. Each one filled with panic, horror, disbelief. Within minutes, the first police sirens pierced the night. A patrol car screeched to a stop in front of the restaurant, followed by an ambulance, red and blue lights flashing violently against the walls. Officers rushed inside, hands on their holsters, scanning the room, and then they saw her. Lisa Monroe. Collapsed in a pool of blood. Her eyes, once full of life, now staring at nothing. A Valentine's Day outfit stained red. A woman who had walked in for a conversation, and never walked out. The first paramedic knelt beside Lisa, pressing 2 fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. Seconds passed. Then, a slow, heavy shake of the head. She's gone. Another paramedic rushed to Amber, who was still frozen in place, her breathing shallow, her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Ma'am, are you hurt? Are you injured? Amber's eyes finally lifted from Lisa's body, locking onto the paramedic with a look of pure dread. No, who did this? Amber hesitated. Then, soft, barely above a whisper, Darren. The entire room seemed to inhale at once. Because Darren Cole wasn't just some stranger. He was a man people had feared for years. And now, he was on the run. At 9:46 p.m., Lisa's sister, Megan, was sitting on her couch, watching TV, her phone buzzing beside her. She almost didn't pick up. Almost. But then, she saw the caller ID, unknown number. Her stomach tightened. When she answered, she immediately knew something was wrong. Is this Megan Monroe? Yes, who is this? This is Officer Reynolds with the local police department. I need you to listen carefully. A pause. A horrible, suffocating silence. It's Lisa. Megan sat up straight, her heart slamming against her ribs. What? What happened? Another pause. And then, the words that would shatter her world. Your sister was attacked tonight. What? Is she okay? Megan, I'm so sorry. She didn't make it. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Just silence. Then, a sharp, heartbroken scream tore through the phone, raw and unbearable. No, no, she can't be dead. She can't, but she was. Lisa Monroe, a mother, a survivor, a woman who had finally found her strength, was gone. And the man who had stolen her life was somewhere out there, disappearing into the night. The moment Lisa Monroe's lifeless body was zipped into a black body bag, the manhunt for Darren Cole began. Detectives knew time was critical, the longer he was on the run, the harder he'd be to catch. Inside the restaurant, police worked fast, documenting everything, the knife, still lying on the floor, its blade dark with Lisa's blood. Amber Lynn, silent, shaking, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Witnesses, frantic, recalling how quickly it had happened. Surveillance cameras told the rest of the story, Lisa walking in, Darren calm, composed, until he snapped. The footage showed the brutal attack in full clarity, and, just as disturbingly, Amber sitting motionless, watching it unfold. But was she frozen in fear? Or was she something else? Darren's truck was gone. But detectives weren't far behind. They immediately traced his known addresses, former hangouts, even old associates. The FBI was called in, issuing a nationwide warrant. Then, they got the first big break. Surveillance cameras caught Darren stopping at a gas station just hours after the murder, still wearing the same clothes, blood visible on his hands. He was heading south. Running. But there was one mistake Darren made. A text message. To Amber. A message that would seal his fate. Don't say anything. I love you. Lay low. We'll figure this out. Detectives didn't hesitate. Amber was brought into custody that night. And under the heat of interrogation, she cracked. She told them where Darren might be headed. And just 2 days later, in a rundown motel in Texas, Darren Cole was cornered, arrested, and taken into custody. His face was blank as they cuffed him. No remorse. No panic. As if he had known this was always how it would end. The biggest question now. What to do with Amber Lynn? She hadn't called the police. She hadn't warned Lisa. She had watched and done nothing. Detectives dug deeper into her past, and what they found was disturbing. Text messages between her and Darren showed a twisted relationship, one where Darren had slowly broken her down, manipulated her, isolated her. She had been groomed, controlled, shaped into submission. One message from Amber to Darren, just a week before the murder, sent chills down the detective's spines. I just want to make you happy. I'll do anything. So, was she a pawn in Darren's game? Or was she a willing accomplice? The prosecution struggled with this question. In the end, Amber Lynn was not charged with murder, but she was charged with obstruction of justice for failing to warn Lisa or alert authorities. Her plea deal resulted in 2 years of probation. To Lisa's family, it was a slap in the face. To them, she had let Lisa die. And all she got was a second chance. By the time Darren's trial began, the case had become national news. The courtroom was packed. Lisa's family sat in the front row, staring at the man who had stolen her from them. Darren? He showed no emotion. Even as prosecutors laid out every horrifying detail, the premeditation, his purchase of the knife the night before. The jealousy-fueled rage, his obsession with Lisa moving on. The merciless attack, 7 stab wounds, each one deliberate and controlled. Then came Amber's testimony. The moment she took the stand, the entire room went silent. Tears ran down her face as she described how Darren had manipulated her, how he had talked about hurting Lisa for weeks, how she had felt trapped. But when the prosecutor pressed her, "If you were so scared, why didn't you call the police?" Amber had no answer. And in that moment, the jury made up their minds about her. Maybe she wasn't a murderer. But she wasn't innocent either. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours. Then, the final moment of reckoning. Darren stood motionless as the verdict was read, guilty. First-degree murder. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lisa's family wept, not in joy, not in victory, but in relief. The monster was locked away. But did it feel like justice? Did it bring Lisa back? No. Nothing could. As the trial wrapped up, one final revelation surfaced. Detectives went back through Darren's prison records, his phone calls, his letters. And they found something chilling. Darren had been writing letters from prison before his release. To Amber. Letters where he talked about Lisa. Letters where he spoke of revenge. She took everything from me. But she doesn't get to win. Lisa had never stood a chance. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a planned execution. A punishment for leaving. A lesson, in Darren's twisted mind, that she was his, until the very end. If you ask Lisa's sister, Megan, if she got justice, she'll tell you, justice? Maybe. But closure? Never. Lisa's son would grow up without his mother. Her family would never hear her laugh again. And every Valentine's Day, they would be reminded of the day Lisa walked into a meeting with her past, and never walked out. Lisa Monroe's story is not just a crime story. It's a warning. A tragic, gut-wrenching reminder of what happens when control, jealousy, and obsession turn deadly. Because Darren Cole wasn't just a bad ex. He was a predator. A man who believed Lisa was his property, that she had no right to a life without him. And that's what makes this case so chilling. Because this isn't just Darren's story. This happens every single day. How many women like Lisa convince themselves to give their abuser one last chance? How many fall for the apologies, the manipulation, the promises that, this time will be different? And how many never live to tell their story? The truth is, leaving isn't always the end. Sometimes, it's just the beginning of the most dangerous chapter. Lisa did everything right, she left. She built a new life. She tried to move on. And still, she wasn't safe. Because some men don't let go. Some men see a woman's freedom as a personal attack. And when they lose control, they make sure no one else gets to have her either. Lisa had already been a victim of Darren's violence before. She had a police record of his abuse. She had the bruises, the hospital visits, the fear. And yet, he got out. And he found her again. How many times does a woman have to cry for help before someone listens? How many times does a man have to threaten, stalk, or hurt before something is done? Because Lisa wasn't just failed by Darren. She was failed by a system that lets men like Darren walk free. A system that only acts when it's too late. Lisa Monroe was so much more than just a victim. She was a mother. A sister. A friend. She was kind, strong, and full of life, a woman who had fought so hard to start over, who had so much left to give. Her son will never get to hold her again. Her family will never hear her laugh again. Her friends will always wonder what could have been. All because of one man's obsession. But Lisa's story won't be forgotten. Her legacy will live on not just as a tragedy, but as a lesson about who we trust, when we listen to our instincts, and how important it is to never ignore the warning signs. But now, I want to hear from you. Do you think this tragedy could have been prevented? Could someone have stopped Darren before it was too late? Or was Lisa's fate sealed the moment he walked out of that prison? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. Because these conversations, they're not just about true crime. They're about saving lives. If you found this case as chilling as we did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Shocking True Crime Exposed. Every week, we bring you real cases that need to be heard. Because sometimes, the truth is far more terrifying than fiction. Check out our playlist for more shocking true crime stories. And as always, stay safe, stay aware, and take care of each other.